Morning.
Morning. I'm on a different computer, so I'm trying to make sure everything works normal.
Yeah,
Jen had,
sounds a little different.
yeah, Jen had to take hers, so I wonder if it's recording through this stupid microphone.
Well, it just got better. It's like a half a second ago.
Yeah, because I raised it up here by my face, probably.
Uh,
It's one of those little ones that's on the headphones. So I wonder if it's trying to
uh,
record through that microphone versus the computer microphone.
so cover your hand over that little microphone and see if it muffles it.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, but it does sound like it did something.
Yeah, I bet you that's it.
It's not
Huh.
bad though. I don't
I
know if
need a
you want to
piece of
hold it up.
I was gonna say I need a piece of tape. I can tape it right here below my chest. I don't feel like sitting there holding it the whole time.
Okay, so go to the bottom little three dots in the bottom right corner
Yep,
and then click settings and then
yep.
change the microphone to internal microphone.
I don't know. Does this computer not have a microphone? It only gives me that one option.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a little. I mean, it was a little cheap. It's Sophie's. It's a like kind of inexpensive Lenovo, but you'd still have a microphone.
Yeah, everything should have a microphone. That's hard to imagine, but it might. Maybe it only
Yeah, it just gives me
registers.
communication, external mic, external mic. Maybe it's this. It still says external mic. Huh. I mean, that's the only option I have. Let's try this and just. Okay. Did anything change, or is it still the same?
No, it sounds different.
Better or worse? Can't tell, huh? I have to talk more.
Delayed. Definitely
Oh, yeah,
delayed.
forget. Yeah, that's worse then. Let's do this. Huh. Trying to think if I have better. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll make it. Let's see. Trying to think if I could do something different with these cords to pull it up closer to my face. Let me try this.
Oh, I've been laying there waiting for you.
All right. So I shortened the cord way up, and that pulls it up near my face.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I don't know if that's any better. Okay.
Sounds.
Feels weird, and I look like a weirdo with it hanging from my neck, but that's okay.
It does look a little weird, but it does sound good.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if I can put it behind my neck and lay it on my shoulder. Then I wouldn't look so weird. Oh, that might have been what to do in the first place. Because now it's probably behind my head. Yeah, hold on, let's try that.
I have. I've been just laying there, moving around, petting the cats, looking out the window. Been bored. And then I was just tired of laying.
You think by now I would know which of these way these headphones go in? I'm baffled by it every time. All right, is that any better? Does that work
It's
okay?
not bad. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then I don't have to look so funny.
Yeah. So we have like a ton of stuff to kind of talk about and figure out before we.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Reminders here. One thing, I need to time us today, so we're a little better on time. So I got that. So with who we're gonna have on next week, basically, so when I reached out, it seemed like all dudes responded, and I'm not. I'm not against talking to people for the sake of talking to people or for information. I'm not overly sold on, hey, you got to have hot chicks in order to get more listeners, because guys who are listening just because there's a hot chick on probably aren't going to listen again anyway. But
When if people are listening to, like, I never know what people look like when I listen to stuff. I mean, I guess if you're viewing it, you might, but I don't fucking, like,
well,
say
I was
Rogan
thinking,
that I listen to. I never know what any of those people look like.
right. The only thing I was thinking is if the attractive person posted the link on their social media,
Oh,
those people all know what they look like.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not hugely important. But I was just, I don't know. I feel like we're going to be skewed. We had our one female, and now we're going to be skewed towards
yeah.
like 38 men in a row.
Eh.
So who's this guy from the All Recoveries thing? He wants to be on our show, or we want him and he's willing?
No, he wants to be on our show. We met him at the banquet. The guy with the green mohawk guy.
Oh, the
Matt.
weed
His
smoker.
name's Matt Meadows. What's that?
The weed smoker.
Yeah, the weed guy. I mean, he's
Okay.
kind of the whatever front person for that All Pathways Recovery too, which I guess is where that came from. It's like he was doing, and same, he came from 12-step recovery, but then I guess for whatever, I don't know specifically what issues, anxiety, PTSD, I'm not exactly sure. He just, wants to smoke weed. I don't know. That would be part of the conversation, but he went to smoking weed, and now he's the advocate for all the legalization and clinics and marijuana for, get off heroin, all that kind of stuff that they say you can use marijuana for. And so then he started the All Pathways Recovery to have like a support group for people that aren't abstinence based. It was basically was the idea behind that. So
it's for, and I guess this would be what we'd ask him. It's for Suboxone or methadone or weed or.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think the gist of it, and again, I don't specifically know because I haven't been to one. I kept saying I was going to go, but then they were meeting on Thursday nights, and I was like, I'm not fucking missing my home group to go. Like, that's not happening. The gist of it is, I think, pretty much smoking weed. Like, I mean, that's me really summarizing something I have no real knowledge of. But I think most of the people that go there were like, hey, I was, shooting heroin and doing all this terrible stuff and smoking crack, and now I'm just smoking weed and everything's fine. I think that's kind of the idea. I don't know exactly, but that's the gist.
Is this like a nationwide thing, or is this something he started here?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. I have to Google, probably Google it and find out in a minute. But yeah, All Pathways Recovery. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they have steps, if they work steps, if they, what their spiritual path is, or any of that.
If they are nationwide, they are not well known. They're not on the first couple pages of Google, so. Huh.
But I know he's been like a proponent of, like I say, the legalization stuff and how, marijuana is supposed to be good to help get off heroin and shit like that. How much, I don't know. Of course, I'm old school. Like, you're just replacing one drug with another. But
right.
I guess when you get into this new thinking of like harm reduction and, is one better than the other? I mean, I guess I could see that point of view. I mean, I could definitely understand that. If you're going to do something, sure, smoke some weed and eat fucking Cheetos and sit in your basement all day. That's fine.
Right.
It's better than shooting up and stealing your parents' VCR. So, I get it.
Yeah.
But it's still, like, to me, it's just substitution. But, I don't know. Huh. That's why it would be interesting to, hear someone else's spin on it.
I'm down. I mean, do we want to try to have him next Sunday, or do we want to like put him off for a month and ask somebody else? Or
No, I mean he's anxious to come on, so he would do next Sunday if we wanted, and then if we wanted to take a little more time to find someone else, if we had some other. I mean, I'm sure I can get some other leads, or you can get some other leads of different people.
Yeah, I got some online people. I'm just trying to keep it mixed up, keep it different.
Yeah, well, then there's the smart recovery, which, the only person around here I know that's really that would probably be halfway knowledgeable about it is Aaron, like Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the guy, but I don't know how deep of a conversation that would be. Like, you know what I mean? Like how, I don't know what his understanding of that is, if it's just something that he's doing because nobody else is doing it, or if he actually knows a lot about it,
I think he actually knows a lot about it, but I was curious if we wanted to have him on or not, because there was like 3 different people online who also said they were willing to come on and talk about smart recovery and have a pretty big understanding.
I'm fine with that too. Like say, I know Aaron's is primary NA, and he kind of got into the smart, mostly through working with voices, and so it's not like that's what he does, on a regular basis. Like that's not his personal recovery pathway. So that's why I'm like, I don't know, how good of a representation he would be of that, because he really does something else,
Well, I almost feel like everybody that I talk to kind of, if they didn't come from somewhere else, they're still also doing something else too.
Right.
It's almost like an addition.
See how people would come from somewhere else, because obviously, AA is the most notable. That's the most well known, and then of course NA probably next. So I can see, most people would be steered there first.
Ooh, you're breaking up, Billy.
Then people would go there and go, that's okay, but that's not really what I'm looking for, and then go somewhere else. Where like Aaron is still actively like an NA person. Like he's an NA person that's hosting these meetings just so that those meetings have a place to meet. He's not so. At least this is my spin. I might be wrong, talking to him, we might figure it out, but I don't think he's like I came to NA and it wasn't really
What is going on here? Very interesting. It's quiet. This is going to be a boring portion of the YouTube because no one is talking. I'm waiting for Billy. He's getting a new computer. I'm doing some last minute research about our step 6. And no one is really talking. I'm talking now, but that's a little different. Step 6. I wonder, man, we should really just read this shit out of the book. Because that is where all the good stuff are. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. We're entirely ready. We're entirely ready. Is that what they say in AA? We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Huh. Interesting. Entirely ready for what?
All right, there we go.
Hey!
I went and got Billy's. He's sleeping anyway, so.
Nice.
Yeah, Sophie told me she was having problems with her, so. She's like, so.
It was funny. I'm listening, and it's like coming through piecemeal, and it's like somewhat distorted, and I'm just still listening. But then it'll like you froze up, and then your voice wouldn't come through for like 24 seconds. But it seemed like when it came back through, it was still at the right part of your speech, like it was still following along. And then you text me that, and when you text me that, like you were still talking. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It was funny.
I wonder if it was some kind of weirdly delayed. I don't know how this one's going to affect the microphone, too. I don't know if I should go back to the. How's that microphone sound?
It's not bad at all.
Okay. All right. All right, we'll try this. We went and bought him like a good computer because he does a lot of gaming and stuff. So for his birthday, we got him like a really decent gaming computer. So it's a little more high end. Sophie just had a cheap one for like schoolwork and shit. And I guess she's been complaining about it anyway. So, of course, it could have other problems. I don't know what kind of shit they download and put on it and everything else. So who knows?
So one thing I did notice last week is that we did, and I don't know if it was because the cliches and it wasn't as, I feel like normally we're kind of in a format where it's like, hey, I make a point, then you make a point, then I make a, like it sort of flows well. And then last week with the cliches, it seemed like we tried to talk at the same time a lot. And you can't hear it very well in this format.
Huh,
so we gotta, I think we'll do better automatically just because we're back to like a step topic and it makes more sense, but we do need to be pay attention to that we talk one at a time.
Okay. Speaking of that, when are we going back to normal?
I know you're
I'm
ready.
back to meetings. People were hugging.
Oh my goodness.
Not many, not everybody, but you know, but a couple people were like, "Oh man, it's so nice to be back to meetings and back to in person," and you know.
Yeah, I really want to see what the next 2 weeks to a month brings in terms of the outcome of all this opening back up and
after the protest. Yeah.
Well, between the protesting and I feel like when they gave orders that said, "Hey, we're going to start opening back up," everybody just ran out and was like, "Oh, it's fine now."
Yeah. Well, I definitely know, like in like whatever the home stores and stuff, they're fucking packed. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what kind of limit legally they're supposed to have, but they're, I don't know. It seems like they're not any kind of limited.
Yeah, I guess what I get from people is that once they say you can shop here or you can do something, even though the guideline is like, hey, you're still safer at home. Everybody's like, fuck it, we can. It's good. I'm like, I don't know that that's what they said.
Well, and I think because there's a lot of people that aren't that worried about it. It's just
That too.
they're like, whatever. If you get it, I'm not sick. I'm not underlying conditions. I don't really care. And that's, of course, I've seen some older people out too that are like, man, fuck it. I'm gonna die one way or another. What do I care? I'm not gonna live my life sitting at home for the next 6 months. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Which is
There's-
kind of what my dad has said, and that's kind of what my brother lives with his mother-in-law down in Florida, and that's what she said. She's like, I don't care. I'm gonna die one way or another. Right? Which I hear this is a pretty horrible way to die, so I don't wish it on anyone. But
I just think everybody talks that shit till they get it. And
yeah,
then it's a
right.
whole
And they're
different
scared
story.
to death. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I don't know. There's like Maryland's having issues with that thing New York was having where kids are getting that complications and that oddball disease that goes with it. And it's like, I don't want to. We can say it's not that bad right now, but we don't know what happens in 20 years or what, extra conditions come about as part of this. We have no idea.
Right. And yeah, and what the long-term, health effects are, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost there. I'm definitely almost there. I was figuring, if nothing else, I think next week when we do a guest, it's easier to do a guest this way to some extent. And then after that, I want to really start figuring out how we're going to video record at the same time in the place. And then I guess from there, we'll start really thinking about that in like 3 weeks-ish, 3 to 4 weeks-ish.
Dude, if it's another day like today, we fucking meet outside somewhere. It is amazing outside.
If it wasn't for the damn like birds and cars and shit, that would be great.
Yeah. Nah, they're fine. People love it. It's nature.
Yeah.
Background noise.
Okay, so I was actually going to bring up the Aaron thing too. So we think that maybe Aaron might not be the ideal candidate. I didn't want to ask somebody else who did smart as a whole, but then offend Aaron because I love Aaron, and I was like,
Right.
I kind of wanted to talk to you about that too.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with him doing it. It's just like, say, I don't know if he's the best representative of it because his primary recovery is NA, and
Right.
a sponsor and steps, and how do you kind of parse out what one does for you or the other when you're going to both things at the same time? I mean,
No, I agree. So I know a guy who, I don't know if I want this guy. I don't know. We'll see. I know a couple guys who said smart. So I'll start figuring that out. But I'll look for you to set up the thing with Matt for next Sunday.
okay.
And we'll operate with that.
Now, do we want to tell him 9, or do we want to say like 9:30 so that we have a couple minutes to get our shit together? Or, I mean, he'll probably do whatever.
Let's say
Make sure he's
9:30.
okay with the 9. Okay, sounds good.
Let's say 9:30. Caroline messaged us and talked about something we had talked about before. We talked about what was it like doing a show about what is it like to date someone in recovery, for somebody in recovery and for somebody not in recovery. Like, what's it like to date somebody that's in recovery? And we had talked about that, but she went similar direction, but more along the lines of like dating once you have some clean time in recovery and some recovery, what's it like to try to date and relationships and all the aspects of that? What if my partner uses? Do I date inside or outside the fellowship? What if I date somebody that, casually drinks? Like all those kind of aspects. So I think that's another show we might want to think about doing in the near future. A pretty relevant one. Like relationships are interesting.
Yeah, or also, and I think this would be kind of interesting, is some like a couple that's been together like while the person was in addiction. Like if one of the partners isn't in recovery, is just a normal earth person, and like what the relationship or marriage might have been like in addiction, and then what it's like now that they're in recovery and some time in recovery, you know?
Do any of them last?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of any that I know. The only one, I mean, it comes right off the top of my head because there's a guy in my home group, Jeremy, but he's just celebrated a year, so he doesn't have like long-term recovery. But I wasn't sure. Eric, bald Eric,
Uh-huh.
and his wife's name is Jamie. Is she actually in recovery? I don't think she is. I think she's just kind of supports him and is really involved with his. I mean, obviously, she's at all kinds of events and does all kinds of stuff. I'm sure you probably met her too, his wife. But I don't know that she's actually an addict. I think she's not.
Hmm.
And they were together while he was using and stuff. So that's another possibility. But I'm sure they're out there. I mean, I'm sure there's people.
I know every time I get like a sponsee or a guy early in recovery that's making these huge decisions and having these issues with his partner, my only thought is that if they were sick enough to be with you while you were using, they will probably not stay with you while you are clean, and you will not want to be with them as you recover.
Right? Because they got some kind of weird enabling fucking
Yeah, it's like something's wrong with them.
codependency issues.
If you're dating a using addict, something is wrong with you. Sorry.
Yeah, unhealthy boundaries. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to mention that. Like, it's kind of, I feel like we had, and we still do have this long list of possible topics for shows, but as people bring them up, I'm like, this is kind of relevant. Like the cliches thing. This is a little more, maybe we should put a little more, push towards doing that. So that seems neat. There's probably quite a few different versions and takes of like relationships in recovery and ways we can look at it, what it's like for the partner, what it's like trying to find a partner. Like, there's a lot of different aspects of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, what do you think about putting memes on our Facebook page?
Oh, I don't care. It's fine.
Well, okay, and so I'll ask it again,
I mean,
but with
I
more
don't post
information.
memes at all, so I don't. I'm not a meme. So.
Well, our entire Instagram is basically memes. Recovery themed memes for the most part. Every once in a while it's something else, but usually that's what it is. And I hope, my hope is that like, hey, this is kind of some of our humor, and I hope you can come on and get something out of that because this is who our personality is. But some of them are a little rough around the edges, a little I don't know, not so kind at times. Most of them are pretty decent. I try not to go too far overboard. Like, I see some that are
I've seen
ridiculous.
some too, and I'm like, that'd be the only ones I'd put up there. Like they're really offensive, funny ones because they're fucking hilarious. Like you got to be able to laugh at yourself. But yeah,
they are hilarious. Well, that's why I wanted to ask. I'm like, do we want to put that on our Facebook? And I feel like we might be better off having more content than just posting, hey, we put a new podcast up once a week.
oh yeah, for sure. Because then people are more likely to interact and engage with it, and then that makes it show up in their feed more. All that stuff. And yeah.
Okay, so I just like one I posted the other day was maybe I can hold it up and you can see it. That would be the easiest way to do it. I found it pretty funny, and I was just thinking of like our ties into voices and how this might not be all that great. Can you read all that?
Back just a little bit. Yeah, I'm fine with. I mean, again, I look at that as like they're like a sponsor, and I don't want to curtail. Like, I'm not gonna curtail my conversation to suit Jen. She can get mad at me if she wants, but I think what I think. I'm not. They bought us a microphone. If it gets offensive to her, I'll fucking pay her back, and like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't think she would. I mean, occasionally she worries about stigma and that kind of stuff, but like, I don't know. We're just people having a conversation. I can't, whatever. But no, I think it's fine.
Okay, and I think the other benefit too is that like we can post it on our page, and this is what I did enjoy last week because it was the first time we did it. We posted the link on the page, and then we could share it from there from my personal account, I can share it to Be More Recovery. I can share it to Cecil County Recovery. I can share it wherever I want or not. And so if it's an offensive meme, like nobody else has to share it. It'll just be on our page. It'll just be
Right.
us. But if it's not offensive and they find it funny, they can share it. And it's like an option. It gives more options.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so we'll do that. We got a shit ton of people that reached out or commented about, because when I posted the episode for the cliches, I posted like, hey, what's your favorite cliche? And
Oh yeah, I saw that. I read through some of the comments, but there was a lot.
Yeah.
So I was
They're
like,
all,
wow. And then
yeah,
I
I
was
guess
super busy at work this week because it fucking was so hot out, Thursday, Friday, from Wednesday to Friday, I was fucking swamped at work. So I didn't get to read them as much, but I saw there was a lot of comments and I read through some of them when I had time, but I didn't get through all of them.
Yeah, there's definitely a ton. And there was in multiple places too. So there's quite a bit of people filling us with, I don't know, I guess we'll have to address all of them in our next cliche episode. All the ones people commented.
Right.
All right. I think that's what I got leading up to what we have to look at. I did reach out, like I said, to that guy, and of course I reached out to the one that was the most exciting to me, the Marijuana Anonymous first, and he didn't get back to me yet. So maybe, I don't know.
And see, that's almost what I think the All Pathways is. Like, because of the people that I know go there, I know a bunch of them smoke weed. Like, so that's kind of why I think that. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what.
Marijuana Anonymous is people trying to not smoke marijuana.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. I thought it was the other way. I thought it was people that just smoke weed.
No, that would be cool too.
People that are just not. Yeah. Okay. So they want to stop smoking weed. Gotcha.
Yeah, the guy I talked to originally said that a lot of them do AA too because they also drank, but I don't know. He didn't get back to me when I reached out to, see what time zone he was in so we could start nailing it down. So hopefully he will, and we can plan that out for a month from now. That's another thing I'm worried about is like having an episode planned out for, hey, we're just going to interview this person about their recovery modality, and then they don't show up.
Yeah, that's okay. We could always come up with other stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
we'll
even this week, I'm like, I got all kinds of other stuff too, just back to the normal, like what's going on in my life. And just I'll throw it out there in case we ever talk about it. So twice this week, I found myself not doing things because I'm worried about what other people will think that it looks like. And I'm like, I don't know if that's good. Like, so I might have told you last week about Jen wanting to go to the Black Lives Matter thing. Did I tell you about all that? So then this week, obviously they shut down Little League, and Elkton just decided, we're officially closed for the season, and came out with what their refund policy is going to be. And all these people were on the Facebook page, basically bitching, we want our fucking money back and this is bullshit and, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, I'm going to go on there and say, look, some of us weren't too harshly impacted by this coronavirus shit. In fact, for me, when I think through it, I'm like, this has actually benefited. Like, I got some days, I've still worked, but I got some extra paid days off. Got fucking extra hazard pay in my paycheck a bunch of weeks. And so I've actually made more money now than I would have normally. And I mean, I'm not saying that's good, like, hey, yay, but I'm just saying for me personally, I didn't have a huge negative impact. So I don't care about donating that extra money to the Little League. And so if you're in a position where you can donate some extra money to the Little League, why don't you just do that instead of, getting a refund? That way they can refund back some of these people that are in a worse position. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to put that on the Facebook page. Then one, I'll probably look like an arrogant douche, like, oh, keep my money, and like, feel like I'm, and it was just too, like, that's too socially awkward. So I just sent a private message to the guy and said, look, you could just keep my money as a donation or whatever. I don't need a refund. But I'm like, because I'm worried about what other people might interpret a good action as, should I not do it? Like, that seems kind of, I mean, we can take almost any action and figure out a shitty way to look at it and go, oh, see, that guy's an asshole. And then, so I don't know.
No, it's tricky. I mean, on one hand, I love people who can just freely live and not worry so much about, what's going to come of that or what other people might think or how other people might interpret it. But on the other hand, I wish more people would consider other people's thoughts and feelings and things. I just saw a post last night that was disturbing. A guy was like talking about some place down in Essex or Dundalk that was they were protesting out front of it because the guy had said some pretty racist stuff. It was a crab house, and the owner had said some pretty racist stuff online. And then, there's like 130 some comments, but a lot of them were racist. Like
Yeah.
there's people on that post saying they will specifically definitely go and get their crabs from there and give that guy business from now on because his business shouldn't be affected by his personal views.
Right.
And I'm like, why shouldn't his business be affected by
Yeah, it
his
absolutely
personal
should
views?
be.
Yeah,
That's exactly the goals of free market,
exactly. And so it's just, there's so much ignorance. It's like, man, I wish some of these people would consider what the hell they're saying before they talked out loud. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
like the opposite of the cake guy. Remember the guy that wouldn't bake the cake for the gay people at the wedding? It's like the
Right.
opposite of that. Like I think like he can have that opinion and he shouldn't have to make that cake, and that's all fine. But when people come to your business and stand outside with signs that say this guy hates gay people or he's a fucking bigot and people don't want to come in your shop, that's fine too. Like that's the flip side of that. You can
Right.
have that opinion, you can have that right. You shouldn't have to bake a cake for people you don't like. But then you can't fucking whine about it when people blast you on social media or stand outside your business and call you, what you've proclaimed yourself to be. Like,
Yes.
so anyway, yeah.
Yeah, don't pronounce yourself king of something, and then when they want to anoint you king, back out of wanting to hear about it.
But yeah, that stuff's been bad. Like, and that's another reason I've actually tried to kind of stay off of Facebook and stuff. Dude, I am related to fucking racist people, and they think because like it's not like overtly racist. It's the backhanded, like, they shouldn't, cops shouldn't violate black people, but look at all this looting and rioting and and I'm like, well, wait a minute, isn't there like there's thousands and thousands of more people that are peaceful protesting and like a few assholes that are looting, that doesn't mean it's all black people looting. And then fucking white people do this when their team wins a hockey championship and shit. They burn down cities and tear shit up, and it's a mob mentality out of control. And anytime you have, you know, 10,000 or 20,000 people together, like you're going to get some assholes, you're going to get some craziness, you're going to get shit gets out of control. But when you say like, see how they act, it's like, oh, well, what do you mean? Are you saying black people? Like, is that all black people? Because videos
Right.
show that there's a bunch of white people in there too. And, what does that mean? They, shit like that, it's like, you can pick out the racism in the backhanded comments.
I think somebody said it best this morning on Twitter. He said, thank God there was a few out of line protesters who decided to destroy some property so I don't have to give a fuck about any of that Black Lives Movement stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like,
And it's
man, you
crazy.
take any excuse to not give a fuck about black
And
people.
now it's all back to like it's pretty much peaceful everywhere, right? I mean, they've pretty much stopped it, but all the protests are going on and nobody's saying nothing now. It's like, oh yeah, now I can't bitch about the looting, so I'm just going to ignore it.
The same people who bitch about the rioting or looting or destruction of property are the same people that want to make America great again and refer to the Boston Tea Party as a great revolution where we destroyed property to prove a point because we didn't like taxes, not because anybody got killed.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of racist shit, man. I'm surprised. I don't know. Maybe I'm not surprised. I tell you one thing I am glad for. I've seen quite a few people who said, I'm sorry it took me so long to get on board with this, but I'm finally here. And that's been nice to see. That's refreshing. Like there's a lot more people, it seems, that are finally catching on.
Yeah, that's for sure. And Jen used to work with a lady, Jackie, who was doing a lot of the peer stuff. That's kind of one of the people she worked with early on. And she would say that, this is years back with the Freddie Gray stuff. And then she said Jackie actually used to say that to her all the time. She'd say, Jen, black people have been bitching about this stuff forever. It's not going to change until fucking white people start bitching about it. That's when something might actually change. She said, in our communities, we've known this forever. I mean, she's the one that, again, Jen grew up in this fucking community and I grew up in this community. So we're not as, whatever, privy to a wide range of racial viewpoints. Like, Jackie would talk to her about, trying to get her to understand, like, do you know how young men in this community feel when they see cops? Like, they are fucking petrified. Like, I see a cop ride down the street and I don't really think twice about it. It's whatever. Or even if I get pulled over for speed and I'm like, fuck, this fucking asshole's going to give me a ticket. And I'm more annoyed by the inconvenience or like what a fucking dickhead he is. Whereas, that guy, when that cop stops him, he's literally in fear for his life about what might happen or if he's going to get beat or arrested or fucking who knows what or killed. I just don't, as a white male, I don't live in that, and if it did happen, like, our fucking community would be like, I would probably be shocked. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whoa, what is going on here? Is this the fucking Twilight Zone? Like, why is this cop being a dick to me? Whereas they live like that all the time. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah,
and it is funny.
Definitely...
I just coincidentally happened to be watching The Wire, which I don't know if you ever watched that or not, but it's it's about the drug cops in Baltimore and kind of the people that work the drug beat in the corners and shit. And I've heard it's pretty accurate. I'm sure it's a little bit overblown. If it's not, man, it's fucking sad. But, it's typical. Like, they just roll up on corners with a bunch of black guys, fucking throw them on the ground. If the kids get smart, they drag them around the corner, just beat the ever-living shit out of them and just leave them. Or, like, just beat them up, drag them into the police station. Oh, he fell and hurt his lip. He's fucking all busted up. Just shit like that. Like, constantly. Like, it's just... And they all know it, and like the sergeants all cover for it, and it all gets just dismissed as nothing. The brutality and
yeah. I mean, I don't like you said. I'm sure it all is probably played up for the screen, but it's all stemming from what happens.
Yeah,
Like, that's real, huh?
Anyway,
do you feel like you have a lot to say about the sixth step?
Yeah, I like the sixth step. Yeah,
I like it. I just don't know how much I have to say about it. We'll find out.
Yeah, but don't we say that every week about every step, and then we
probably.
Yeah, then we fill up all the time with fucking talking about the step.
What did I want to pull up here? I wanted to pull up something. I was getting ready to pull up a thing, and now I don't know what. Oh. Yeah, all right. Never mind. I'm gonna stop all that. I don't know. I guess we're ready then, right?
Yeah, give me 1 minute. Just gotta send a text real quick. Okay. All right.
Alrighty. Oh. Hey there. Welcome back to Recovery, sort of. I'm Jason. I'm a guy in recovery.
I'm Billy. I'm a person in live, in-person recovery.
Oh man, he's doing face-to-face now. I'm not there yet. I'm I'm still in virtual recovery, but it's working right now. So we're going to talk about step 6 today. It is June, which I don't know why. For whatever reason, like July just feels like it should be the 6 months of the year for me. June doesn't seem like it should be. It seems like 5. I don't know why, but it is the 6th month, and that means step 6, and we'll get there in just a moment. Before we do that, I did want to remind people we are on Twitter, Instagram, and we are now newly on Facebook. And I don't have the exact specific links to any of that, but I think it's in the show notes actually, is the true links to those places. But if you just want to look it up in this day and age where everything is conveniently searchable, it's some version of recovery, sort of. It shouldn't be very difficult to find. Everybody else thinks they have really solid recovery. We're just unsure with our sort of.
Yeah. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, basically. And also along with that, we have some friends who message us regularly, and talk about things. Stephanie, Caroline, Jenny, to name a few. But we love that. Like, we like interacting with people and talking to people, and people who want to hear different topics talked about, and people who just want to share some other stuff that they're going through with us. And so feel free to reach out. We love that kind of stuff. We did post last week's show about cliches up and got a ton of comments about everybody's favorite cliche or least favorite cliche. So that's cool. And we're going to do another cliche episode in a few weeks. And so I'm guessing we'll address all those commented cliches before we finish our list.
That might be a whole show, getting through all those.
Oh, I might be too. There's a shit ton. People definitely have feelings. I think the most surprising thing to me about the entire cliche thing is that even though I think there's a lot of truth to these, it just seems like a lot of people have had their feelings hurt by a cliche somewhere along the line. Because I got a lot of people that said, I don't like this one because it didn't seem to take my feelings into consideration when it was used, or people use this in an insensitive way. And even like with you talking about your wife not liking It Is What It Is, her and I had some Facebook discussion about that, and it was, that it was used insensitively. And I was surprised by that. I didn't realize people were so insensitive with their cliche use.
Yeah, her and I had talked about that too, and I was like, well, when I say that, I don't mean it in the way that I guess she's heard it implied or it's been applied. So, yeah, it's interesting.
There was, a couple of the other ones, like keep it simple, stupid. Somebody had been offended by that. Somebody else had been hurt by feelings aren't facts. And like listening to people, I can see that. I guess really what I'm getting out of that is that these cliches, they are what they are, right? And people are insensitive, and we just use them to shut people down instead of dealing with what they're going through with them.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you hear them, it depends on what state you're at in the moment. Obviously, if you say to someone, feelings aren't facts, and you just hear that thrown out at a meeting when you're in like a regular day, it's probably not a big deal. But if you're in the middle of like going through a divorce or separation or something, and you're all depressed and you think life sucks, and then people are telling you, well, feelings aren't facts. It's like, well, fuck you, buddy. You don't have my life.
Right.
So
right.
in the wrong moment, those things can hurt.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was interesting to see that so many people, had beef with different ones for the same reason. And that was it was eye-opening to see that, oh, okay, so maybe this is just how people are using them. They're just using them because it's easier to say that than it is to actually address what the person is going through with them. It's easier just to shut them down. It is what it is. Shut the fuck up.
Or try to simplify it. It's like some of these life issues are fucking complicated. Some of these situations we deal with on a day-to-day basis, there isn't just a simple, easy 3-word cliche that's going to fucking fix it, make your feelings all better, and help you live the rest of your life better. Like, some of it's a struggle. And if you're dealing with some deep, relationship issues, maybe around some, infidelity, or you have a marriage you've been in for a long time that's struggling, like, just walking out the fucking door, isn't always the easiest thing to do. I mean, it's simplifying someone's long-term struggle into a 5-word cliche, is kind of minimalist.
Yeah, no, I think you're entirely right. One of the things I got out of reading the step work for step 6 to talk about it today was that a lot of our cliches do come from the literature. And so I caught a couple more in the 6th step reading. And you're right, though. You can't just simplify it. It's not like they said step 6 and then just listed one cliche. It's like 38
Right.
paragraphs, right? And then
Right.
there's a cliche or two in there.
Yeah, and it's almost like we talked about with the when we were talking about humility. It's like in the right context, the cliche about humility, and I'm trying to remember what it was off the top of my head, but a cliche about humility in the right context is helpful, but when you use it, just in general to sum up the whole meaning of humility, it seems kind of stupid.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was either.
It was about humility, not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less.
Yeah.
So again, in the right conversation or in the right moment like that, this could be incredibly enlightening, but if you're trying to explain humility and you say, well, I can sum up humility in one great cliche, and then you mutter that shit, it's like, well, wait a minute, you forgot some really important things there.
No, exactly. And I think the cliches are very much this might not be the greatest thing to say, but kind of like stereotypes. Like stereotypes come from some truth, right? Like there's some truth to them in the first place, but that doesn't mean that they're generalizable to every person or situation, and they're definitely not true all the time. Like they just have some recognition of truth in it. And so cliches, same way. They don't ultimately describe everything to do with anything. They are just, useful things that stem from a kernel of truth somewhere. So now that I've unduly, given credence to stereotypes, let's move on and talk about step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So as a guy in a particular program, all my steps always had we in front of it, right? Like we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And it's always interesting to me to remember that in every other program, basically, we is not there. Like I think we're the only one that says we. And so this step sounds weird without we. Most of them sound okay, right? But this one, we're entirely ready to have, like, that just sounds strange to me.
Yeah, I didn't know that the we wasn't in there. I kind of almost assumed they all were the same. Now I kind of have to look it up real quick.
Yeah, no, so everybody pretty much, nobody borrows from us. They all borrow from the original, the AA version, and AA's version has no we along with all that. And I like our adoption of we. I just I can't believe this step sounds so awkward without it. Like who were? Who the hell starts a sentence with were?
Yeah, not even the hyphenated, like we are.
Right. Just were.
Yeah, that is. I just looked at it. I'm like, wow, that is weird.
Yeah, you're right. The hyphen would have made a lot. The apostrophe, like
apostrophe.
weird.
Yeah, not.
Yeah,
yeah.
It would have made a lot more sense. We're entirely ready.
Right.
Just were.
Right.
We're entirely ready.
Maybe it got lost in translation from the 1950s. It should have been hyphenated.
Right. So I will say, when I was reading the basic text and it works how and why for this, I was really thinking, God, why don't we just read the basic text and the it works how and why for these episodes? These are good.
Yeah.
So I do want to start. I want to start with the first 2 paragraphs of the basic text. Maybe they will help give some understanding to someone who has never. Oh, why do I not have it up? I have the wrong one up. Of course, I'm not ready. So I just think, in trying to make this understandable for people who are either A, new and never dealt with this, or B, have never dealt with recovery because they're not in recovery, I'm hoping to try to make some kind of sense of this. So maybe we could start there and just sort of try to explain it even before we read. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So if we're following along in the order of steps, we did a searching and fearless moral inventory, right? Which is like a list of all these things we've done we've done in our lives and our patterns and ways that we, act in ways that don't work well for us. And then we admit this exact nature of our wrongs to ourselves and to another human being and to a power greater than us as we understand it. And now in 6, we've kind of come to this understanding that we have these defects of character. And that's, ways in which we act that just aren't good for us. Is there a better explanation you could have to try to explain this to somebody?
Yeah, so the way I would immediately try to explain it, the point of step 6 is, the early steps were addressing like our active addiction. Really, the only what I would call action that we're taking is, look, stop using, start coming to these meetings. Then we'll give you some other suggestions, maybe get a sponsor, get someone to help you along the way. But we're mostly addressing or presenting like our past and our active addiction. This is the first step that gets into, all right, so what's behind the addiction? What's our motivating factors for kind of why we use, why we do what we do, why we stay stuck in like self-destructive patterns that don't serve us. I mean, for most people, using drugs doesn't work out well. It's usually destroying their lives, causing lots of chaos, but yet we go back to it time and time again, because it's like you've heard it described. It's like that comfortable old blanket or that old pair of shoes that it's like, well, I don't know another way to find comfort. So even though this is killing me, I'll go back to using. And so we kind of address that in the first couple steps. Then we look at our past and we dig into all that in 4, and then we share it in 5. We kind of talk about all that. But then 6 is like the first time where we're going, all right, so, what actions can we take like in our life in the here and now going forward to get better and improve?
Yeah, kind of. I guess what I got out a little bit of what you were saying is, we the drug use was the pattern that was killing us, and now that we've removed that, we start to see some of the other things we do that also aren't beneficial for our life and relationships to others, but we've just done them for so long, and I think without addressing these, right? If I don't address some of these what we call character defects, which is like, disproportionate jealousy, things that are blown out of proportion. They're normal character traits. Everybody's a little jealous. Everybody's a little self-righteous, but we, in our state, blow them out of proportion to the point where they create dysfunctional relationships with others, and they can lead to isolation. They can lead to shame about the way we treat people. And these are the types of things that could lead us back to using, or just lead us to have a miserable life. And either way, it's not good. And so it's like, okay, we, like you said, we get the drugs out of the way. Now let's address some of these other things that are going on with us that are coming from the same exact place of like self-centered fear, self-hatred. We use these tactics to cover all that up. And so these are stemming from the same place. Now we need to attack them.
Right. And the way I've, was sort of taught, or the way that resonated most with me about what addiction is, it's not just a drug problem. Drugs are just a symptom of a much bigger problem, and that bigger problem is my self-centeredness, my self-serving behaviors, my, self-seeking behaviors. And addiction is just a part of that. So for me personally, like just removing the drug or removing the active addiction didn't fix the rest of the problems or the underlying problem of why I went back to using time and time again. And so in 6, I'm finally getting a glimpse of like, okay, like you said, like now we've taken the drugs out. Let's look at some of these other problems that you have, that lead you back to wanting to use.
Almost as if when you got a cold in the winter, right? And the most pressing concern was you got a fever with it, and your fever was 104. You address the fever first, right? Look, your nose might be running, your throat might be sore, your body might be achy, but if your fever is like 103, 104, that's your main concern. That's the drug use. Now, once we get that fever down, okay, now what else can we do about this runny nose and this sore throat? Is there anything to treat those with as well? Like, we get the main part out, the deadly part out first, and then we want to deal with the other symptoms of that cold.
Right. And with addiction, it's kind of tricky because it's easy to see the destruction of the using. It's not always as easy or as prevalent, the destruction of some of these behaviors. So hopefully through our fourth and fifth step, we've dug into some of the reasons why we do what we do. Why do we cheat in all our relationships? That didn't just have to do with drugs. It's like, well, I got drunk, so I went out and cheated in all my relationships. There's some underlying behaviors there. And, again, using might have been the main reason why you stole from your family, but it probably wasn't the reason of why you felt so much guilt and shame and would like make up stories and excuses for behaviors or tell people you did certain things you didn't do, like making up lies about yourself to feel better about yourself. Like those kind of behaviors, they're not using, you know what I mean? They don't come from using. They come from something else that's sick. Use the word sick, but something else inside of us that needs addressed. And I would say this is kind of like for like earth people, like this would be like the therapy step, like why I think people go to therapy. And you may know this better, but at least my understanding, like people go to therapy to help try to identify like patterns of behavior that they're stuck in, or maybe thoughts or beliefs that they're kind of stuck in that they can't seem to work through, that they need some more insight or more outside help with. And I kind of always took it like this is like the therapy step for addicts. Instead of going to a therapist, we just meet with another recovering addict, go through our fifth step, and start to figure out what patterns of thinking and behavior that we're stuck in that aren't serving us well.
So, so there's a lot of different therapy modalities that would, look at life a little different, but there is a strong belief among many therapists that would say people do things because they are coping skills, right? We don't do things for no reason. We do it because it helps us cope with life. And maladaptive coping skills are built in very early on in our childhood homes. Some interaction with our parents usually, or our caregiver, gives us a way to cope with the world or process the world in an unhealthy way that has consequences that don't feel good for our life. And so this would kind of line up with that, right? The more we understand about addiction, that's exactly what drug use is. It's a coping skill that helps us deal with life when we can't function or deal with it any other way. And so, these are the way a therapist would address, hey, why do you keep dating men that you feel like you're saving, right? If you're a lady who does that, that's like a common thing that seems to, like, women like to be caretakers. And so they date these men that for whatever reason, struggle to take care of themselves, and they want to save them in some kind of way, shape, or form. Or then there's, people who are overly, they want to be perfectionists, right? And they struggle with any time they fall short. Like there's all these other different maladaptive ways of coping with life that aren't suiting people well. And so this would be the same type of thing. They want to, address those issues and find healthier ways to live with it. And in therapy, the same thing we find in the step is that we aren't doing these as surfacey things. There's a core belief, a distorted core schema or belief system about ourselves lying underneath of it that is causing us to act this way, to try to bring in information that makes us feel better or alleviates the way we feel about ourselves.
Right. And so, we're in this point through 5, we've tried to, hopefully with the help of a sponsor or whoever we went through our step with, or, another guiding person, we're hoping to have identified some of these patterns, identified some of these, maladaptive thinking habits. And in 6, we're looking for active solutions. Like, okay, now I've identified the problem. Now what do I want to do about it? Or what can I do about it? Or what are some solutions to getting out of this?
I found it funny as I was reading this and what some of the emphasis of the reading was on. And it's been a minute since I've done a 6, and it's been even longer minute since I did a 6 the way we typically do it out of our guide. The last time I did it a different book. But there was so much emphasis in the reading on like the goal of this step is to become willing, which makes sense being that it says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. But that wasn't what I picture what I do when I work 6. When I picture 6, I make a list of character defects. Like that's, I don't picture becoming willing or ready. Like that's, so it was interesting to see the difference there. I don't know. What do you think of when you think of 6, like off the top of your head that you do?
I mean, I don't know. I'm a person that believes like willingness is action. I mean, again, just thinking about shit doesn't get it done. It doesn't say we thought about it. It says we became willing, which to me implies we're doing something about it. So I would say, yeah, willingness implies action. And then I guess we kind of begin to put that action into practice in 7, I guess is the idea behind 7. Now we're getting ahead, but if I have a behavior, I mean, again, if I think that, hey, I'm cheating on my wife and I think it's completely okay and I have no problem with it, then there's no point in going any further. You know what I mean? There's no point in moving forward to 7 or 8 or, trying to make amends or any of that stuff. I mean, if I don't even recognize or have any inclination to change, I mean, what's the point of going forward? Right, so I guess it does require a willingness before you're going to do any action.
So here's these first 2 paragraphs in the the basic text, and it says, "Why ask for something before we are ready for it? This would be asking for trouble. So many times addicts have sought the rewards of hard work without the labor. Willingness is what we strive for in step 6. How sincerely we work this step will be proportionate to our desire for change. Do we really want to be rid of our resentments, our anger, our fear? Many of us cling to our fears, doubts, self-loathing, or hatred because there is a certain distorted security in familiar pain. It seems safer to embrace what we know than to let go of it for the unknown." And I don't know, that struck me as really relevant last night, that, so many parts of it. One, that, I always want the rewards of the hard work without the labor. That stood out first. I was like, yep, that's me. They're talking about me. But then also like how sincerely we work the step is proportionate to our desire for change. I mean, that's almost, it might as well be a cliche. It seems so obvious. And yet at the same time, it's almost profound too. It's like, yeah, I guess the more tired I am of myself and the way I treat people and the way I feel about that, the more willing I'm going to be to do something about it.
Yeah. And it's the old, pain motivates change idea. It's like, when I get sick of myself enough, then I find the willingness. And then I don't know how much you're going to go into it later, but it talks about it later in that step, in that reading in the basic text. It talks about, kind of how we have a tendency to get stuck here and live in these defects for a while until they become so painful we're like sick of ourselves. And I'm paraphrasing there. I can't remember. It says it, I'm sure, way more poetically than I just did. But yeah, it's like if I am not. So I think about this back to being an addict, is that I always want to get my way. I always want what I want, and I am typically good at getting it, at least thinking I'm going to get it despite the cost. I will lie, I'll manipulate, I'll cheat, whatever I got to do to get what I want. In this step, we begin to say, all right, am I willing to let that kind of stuff go? Am I willing to try to practice some principles in place of getting what I want, and trusting that there's going to be a good outcome there, and I always kind of go back to this example of, let's take like, this would be an old behavior that I would do in kind of a newer way that I might handle it. Hopefully now, not always, but hopefully now is, let's say I have a day that I wake up and I'm like, man, I feel like shit and my head hurts, or not even my head hurts. I don't even feel physically bad. I want to take a day off work, whatever. It's a nice day. I want to go out and fucking ride my bike or go to the beach with the kids or whatever. I just want to take a day off. So I don't want to just call work and say, hey, I want to take a day off to go hang out at the beach because it's nice out. Because then they'll be like, well, what the fuck? That sounds pretty irresponsible. But I would be likely to call and say, oh, my head hurts and my throat's not feeling so good, and I'm not feeling great. I think, is it okay if I just take the day off? That's lying, but I'll justify that kind of behavior because it's going to get me what I want, and it's because the fear of not doing that. Like if I say that I'm sick, 9 times out of 10, no one's going to say, well, you have to come to work. Obviously, you can make other people sick. And well, especially in this climate, God, if you call and say,
stay the hell home.
My fever's like 94 or that's not even a fever, but I was thinking 104, but that's awful high. My fever's 104 and I need to take off. They'd be like, fuck, stay home for 2 weeks. But no, like I'll use that sort of behavior because that's going to get me what I want. If I just make up what I think is going to sound good, then I'll get what I want. No harm to the other person. They don't really know that I'm lying. So what fucking harm is that? It's fine. Now what I've learned is there is a harm to that. That's a relationship that I have with people at my work that I've now brought in this dishonesty and deceit and manipulation and all these negative character defects I've brought into this relationship. And for me personally, I believe that shit carries through. Like that carries through in that relationship. Like if I'm bringing all that negativity and all that, character defect stuff into that relationship, I'm probably going to do it in other areas too. I'm probably going to justify it in other situations too. And then that relationship's not built on spiritual principles. It's not built on honesty, trust, humility, these pot love, those positive things that I want in my relationships, in all my relationships. So, I have to become willing to say, you know what, I'm going to live this spiritual path, run the risk of maybe them saying, hey, you know what, today's not a good day. We're really busy. Can you maybe schedule for a day off or do another day off? We really need you to come in today. But I want to get what I want. So I'll do this negative thing. And in this is the step where I go, you know what? I'm going to trust that living in this spiritual process, maybe not in this immediate moment, but in the big picture of my life is going to be better for me than getting what I want in this immediate situation.
Yeah, that's definitely tricky, and it talks. You're right. It does talk a lot about that through the literature about being willing to give up the manipulation and trying to guide situations to the outcome we want, because that's what we're ultimately doing often with these character defects, is trying to get the outcome we want, and we go a little too far in doing that. So let's take a quick break. We're right about the time for the Voices Ed. Then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about step 6. I don't know how to mark down times. Like I'm timing how far we are, and that's good. We're 28 minutes into the show, but that doesn't really tell me how far we are into the recording.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say, can you look at the time on the thing? But that doesn't help because the recording probably doesn't have a timestamp.
No, but I think I did start at about 9. So if I write down at least like what time it is now, I can kind of get a general idea of where to look for. We're about an hour and 12 minutes in. So that'll help. That'll be something. So I know, I have a list of like some quotes. There's a couple paragraphs in the It Works How and Why that were short and said some relevant stuff. I got a little of my own personal experience about getting to 6 and what that was like. I did want to bring up, besides those 3 things, the only other thing I had was to bring up like how this works for you in the sense of God, since that's interesting to me.
I figured that would come up. I thought about it a little bit, but I'm like, I know it. It's not like I got to think about it too much. Right. But I was like, oh, I'm sure that's going to come up because it says God in there.
Oh, yeah. God's going to remove them. I want to see how that works. Yeah. Did you have anything like that stood out that you wanted to specifically talk about, or you just let us go?
The only other thing, and I don't even know that it needs to come up at this point or in 7, but whether there's a difference between shortcomings and defects and the different ideas people have with that shit. But that, I don't know. That's like beating a dead horse to me. It's like everybody's got their own thing about it. And it's not overly interesting. So I think you look at it same as me. Like they're kind of the same. It's,
Yeah, I don't
kind
think
of,
much about it.
yeah. But I mean, there's people that feel like they're very different, and I think I did early on too. I mean, but now I probably don't. It's like the
Yeah,
coming is the behavior or the thought, and the defect is the behavior or something like that. I might have them backwards now, but
yeah, no, there's definitely people that specifically say that, and even I've informed people that he didn't even like the dude who wrote it didn't care, and like
yeah, right.
his take on it. They're like, no, it still matters to me, and I'm like, all right,
Yeah, right.
I don't know how, but I guess. I wonder if I should pee now before we jump back in. Probably. Let me do that. I'm gonna hit the bathroom real
Okay, I'm gonna
quick.
grab some more. A little bit later today, you're gonna do some workout in the yard. Get some stuff cleaned up out there. Okay.
Yeah, I get free cycle emails that people are giving away stuff, and I just saw one for girl Legos, and I was trying to figure out what the hell girl Legos were.
Oh yeah, it's a big thing.
Just okay, girl
They're
Legos.
pink and they have girly things, and
Uh,
because Legos used to always be, if you think about it, they were race car drivers and mechanic shops and space stuff, and you know all that kind of stuff. There wasn't you know girls Legos that were pink, and I remember this when the kids were young. That's how I kind of know. Jen was you know bitching, like they need some pink girls Legos, kitty cat, shit like that.
I mean, I like having the options for beauty parlor Legos. I think if we call them girl Legos, we don't do ourselves any justice in allowing people to like what they like, though.
All right. Yeah, true.
All right, we ready to hop back in? What do we want to
Said
hop back in
we
with?
call them gender inclusive Legos. Now you just brought it up. We got to find some new terms for Legos.
Just Legos.
Yeah. But
Uh, so you were just talking about how this had worked in your life a little, right? Isn't that what we were just talking about?
yeah, pretty much.
How you like how you might have acted and how this is helped you to not lie in that kind of situation
Right.
currently.
Well, yeah, and why the like where I guess I was trying to explain what the willingness would look like. Like what do I need willingness for? Why is that important? And the willingness
Mm.
from like I need to identify that I have this pattern of behavior and I need to be willing to let go of that, uh getting what I want, trusting in the process, I guess is the way I was trying to explain that.
Okay, I think I got something I can jump back in with that's kind of relevant to that. So let's keep track of these times, see if that helps me any. Okay, here we go. All right, getting back to step 6 and character defects. And I think, some of the stuff you said just made a kind of a point too on the side of that, which is a lot of times, and you said this earlier, a lot of times the smaller defects, like the drug use was obvious how it made our life unmanageable, but like calling out of work and saying you have a headache and going to the beach instead, it's harder sometimes to see the negative parts of that in our life. And so this is where it might be a struggle to become willing to let go of the behavior because we see the positive aspects of it instead of the ways it harms the relationship we have with people and our trust level with it, but also B, if we tell little lies like that, we're going to start assuming everyone in our life tells little lies like that when they have to cancel on plans with us. B, it's possible over time we start feeling shame. That to me is like a process I kind of look at. Somebody called it like the road narrowing, right? When we first get clean, we're on this highway of like, hey, everything's acceptable because I'm a better dude today than I was when I was getting high. And then as we progress down that highway, it kind of gets slimmer and slimmer what's, allowable for us to do. We start feeling guilty about other behaviors that maybe don't work. And then further down the highway, maybe it's even smaller behaviors that make us upset. And so I think maybe that might not be a behavior that gets addressed your first time through the steps, right? That might be the second round of step 6 where something like that would pop up and bother you. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think in the beginning, of my recovery, there was a lot of things that I would consider defects that I don't struggle with now. And I say that loosely because I think of like, let's just take, stealing, for example, or, whatever you want to use the word, embezzling money from my job. Like when I was using, that was fine. That was behavior that was like, they owe me and I could justify it away and do that kind of stuff. And then as I got clean, like it was obvious in the beginning, like, hey, that's not the person that I want to be today. It's not a thing that I want to do. So those things are a little, say, easier for some of us. Those things are a little easier to address early on. Like just stopping using will fix some of those things fairly easily. I realize other people have different issues with, say something like theft or whatever. But again, that's the point of a fifth step is for me to go through, figure out what my specific issues are, because the issues that I have, these defects that I have, I mean, there's some pretty general ones that most addicts have, but the things that you struggle with as an individual are different than the things that I struggle with as an individual. And the way that I, wrestle with or try to make sense of, my lack of self-worth or lack of self-esteem, the behaviors that I do to make myself feel better about that may be different than the behaviors that you would do to make yourself feel better about that. Um, but I think back to what you were talking about, and some of these things almost fix themselves when we get clean, whereas others of them are a little, more deeply ingrained. They're a little more insidious. And so, we'll kind of fight hard with those same justification, rationalization. We'll use those same skills we used for our using to justify and rationalize using drugs, to justify and rationalize behaviors that we know aren't good, that we know creates a sense of uncomfortableness in us. And again, until we get to that point of pain, like, man, I'm sick of feeling like this, man, I'm sick of, lying to this person at my job that I respect. Man, I'm sick of, lying to my spouse about where I was or who I was talking to or whatever. It's um some of our behaviors are a little more deeply ingrained, and so it takes a little more work to recognize why we need to change them.
Man, you touched on so many good points in there. One of the ones I think I want to touch on first, you mentioned like what bothers you might not bother me, and that's like four different points in one in my head at least. But I'm thinking about like, yeah, okay, so there's some people who get, free from, using a substance and then gambling. Like they get all caught up in spending money on gambling, betting on this, betting on that. And there's people who never even get into substances who still have, a gambling addiction. That's just not one that ever seems to grasp me yet. I will say yet, because I don't know what the future brings. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's just because I'm a cheap ass, like gambling does not get me. Like it does not do anything for me. I'm like, no, I'm losing money. But some people get a lot of whatever it is that, brings them joy and pleasure seeking in that. And so I don't struggle with that one. And yet, like, I remember a lot of times I would talk to my old sponsor about, hey, one of my bigger ones that I've struggled with throughout the years is seeking validation outside of my relationship from other people. And like, that was just not something that he ever struggled with for whatever reason. It was just not his cup of tea. But he always had an understanding that it is some people's, right? It was never like a judgmental view of, I don't struggle with that, so you shouldn't either. And I appreciated that. But it is interesting how we each kind of have our own, pieces that matter. And within that, the question is like, when I first went through step 6, I wrote every character defect. I had them all, right? Because I do to some extent. They're all part of me. And yet what I've realized since then is that, right, I just need to focus on the really troublesome, I don't know, top 10, top 5, top 3, maybe. Like there's got to be some limitation to that because I couldn't address all of them. It was useless to write all that information. To be aware, I guess, but really I need to deal with what bothers me in the here and now because that's proportionate to how much work I'm willing to do on it is how much they're bothering me. And so when I'm writing about these defects, like, oh yeah, every day I go into work and you're supposed to take one Tootsie Roll and I take 3. Like if that don't bother me, I'm not going to fucking change it. So why am I wasting my time focusing on it? What do you think about that? Should we limit our character defect usage to what's really going on?
I don't know if I don't want to say it's okay to justify it to limiting it, but I would say that there is something to be said for we're all human and none of us is going to be perfect. And I know, when my wife and I have talked about like the 10-step inventory at the end of the day. And if you do it kind of loosely out of the IP from our fellowship, at the 12-step fellowship I go to, one of the questions in there is about kind of what harm have I caused today? What have I done that I regret today? What character defects have I acted out on today? Those are a couple of the questions that are in there. So the way she believes, and I don't know, I've wrestled with this sometimes, but what she believes is if I answer that, like, no, I've been perfect today, then I'm either not being honest with myself or I am in denial about the way that I'm living. Because probably every one of us in any given day, has acted out in some way in a defect or has caused some kind of harm to someone, other than, I guess, if you sat at home by yourself and did nothing, which maybe in this current climate is possible. But in general, you know what I mean? If you're going out about your day and dealing with people, even if it's just, flicked off the guy in the car next to me, like that's still a harm that I've caused. So I don't want to ever make it seem like, well, if that's all I did, that's okay. But at the same time, like I am human. And if I make a comparison about the person that I was, 5 years ago to the person I am today, am I moving in the right direction? Am I consistently working on things to make myself better? Because the other thing that comes up is and this is where I was kind of going with some of like the lying or even the stealing. Like those thoughts, even with, you know, multiple years clean, still pop up in my head. You know, I'm still in the heart. Yeah, just the other day, I bought like, so I bought this set of stuff for the tub, but it didn't have the color of the knobs that I wanted, so I had to buy a second set that was a different color of these knobs. And then so what I wanted to do was take the knobs out of the package, put them into the other package, take the colored knobs that I wanted, and then go return the one thing to the store. You know, even though it wasn't what I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but I wanted to manipulate in the store and find a way to scheme so that I could get my, you know, $10 or $12 back because I didn't want to spend that $10 or $12. And I didn't do it, but that thought is still there. You know, it's still what comes to mind on how to live my life. Um, the difference today, because I'm actively working a 7th step, is that I don't do that. You know, the thought can be there, but I don't follow it up with action. You know, so today I am, you know, willing to let go of that defect. I'm willing to surrender that defect and just, you know, live the spiritual path that I've embarked on. So I don't know if that quite answered your question, but
Well, no, yeah, it was interesting. I remember being at like Home Depot and needing whatever it is, a few plumbing pieces, a few screws, whatever. And, you know, being a rather cheap individual, seeing that the box or the package of them was, you know, $10, but then also seeing that someone had previously come before me and already stolen a few out of a package that was open, right? And thinking, man, I could just grab these few and I'd have what I needed and nobody's ever going to know. Right.
right.
And the thought is there, of course. Like, why spend $10 for this large package of shit I don't need when I could buy a few, or I could just grab these few from, you know, the package that someone conveniently opened for me. God's will, obviously, it's sitting right here in front of me. And then I just always go back and revert to what I remember someone saying, which was that, look, chances are as humans, we all have a price, right? We all have a price where somebody could buy our spirituality or our morals, but mine's going to be higher than a few bucks, right? I might sell it out. It might be for a few million. I might endorse some product that kills people or whatever, but it's not going to be for $10, right? I'm going to spend this $10. It's not going to be like to somebody who steals bubble gum or a pack of bubble gum. Like, I'm not going to sell my morals and values for 65 cents, right? Like, it's going to have to be a good price if I might steal some money from the racetrack or the lottery or something, but it's going to be a large amount. I'm not going to sell myself short for a couple bucks.
Yeah, and it's funny. Well, then this will get a little off topic, but I always say that about the environment. I'm like, everybody wants to save the polar bears until gas is $7 a gallon, and then fuck the polar bears, right? So, but yeah, and so the other side of that is on any given bad day, if I'm not consistently working on my spirit, it's just for me personally, I'll return that shit or I'll take that stuff out of the package and walk out of the store. It's not like I'm exempt from that shit in my life nowadays. I like to say that, you know, 9 times out of 10, or I'll even blow it up a little bit and say 99 times out of 100, when I come up with those little stupid kind of thoughts of acting on these character defects, I don't do them, but they still come up. And to get back to what your original question was, so I got to be careful because I'm my own worst enemy. My thinking is what gets me into trouble most of the time. I can't justify, like, hey, I'm not, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. I'm not shooting dope. I'm not stealing from my family. I'm not cheating on my wife. So it's okay to take, you know, a $3 item from Home Depot. Like, fuck no. It's for me personally, the way that I want to live today and the spiritual place that I want to be in my life, I can't justify any defects of character. I can't justify, you know, any I can't make any of these little slip ups, you know, okay in my own spirit. But at the same time, trying to balance that out with they're going to happen. And then I have to, which would get into the other steps. Like, then I can apply the other steps, which is, okay, so I've done this thing that I don't like. Now I need to get into a process of making amends. But, you know, again, I don't want to make it seem like, I would say that it's okay to say, well, I'm better than I was, so it's okay to do these negative behaviors now.
Yeah, it's tricky. I've definitely heard some odd takes on this step. I've heard, how do you become entirely ready? And I've heard people with substantial time and recovery say you become entirely ready by diving on in and doing that behavior more. Because
Yeah.
the only way you're really going to be ready is by being sick of yourself. And so if you're at a point where, like, maybe you are stepping outside of your relationship and there's some guilt, but there's also some, damn, this feels good. And you can't really let it go yet. Like, how do you let it go? Well, you keep doing that shit and you will get caught, or you will feel guiltier, or like some negative thing will happen that will have you become entirely ready at some point, I hope.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that is true to a degree. I've also heard the saying, maybe we'll get back to this in the cliche episode, but a smart person learns from their own mistakes. A wise person learns from other people's mistakes. So yes, this pain can be a good motivator, but if I have positive male role models in my life, I mean, I guess this goes back to, why I continue to go to meetings, why I continue to be actively involved in a process of recovery and try to be engaged with people that are living in this similar spiritual process. Because nowadays that I'm a little bit older and a little bit smarter, I don't feel like I have to be that person anymore that, like, I learned the hard way. I got to do everything myself and have that experience myself. Like, fuck, man, maybe I'm smart enough. I don't have to do that anymore. Like, I've done that for so long. Like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be unique and I'm going to be better. And, you know, you, I guess maybe that's where this thing of faith comes in. Like, the faith is that I don't need to. I'll backtrack just a minute. So we talked about take something like low self-esteem, and you had talked about you know overcoming your low self-esteem maybe with seeking value of women, getting in relationships, whatever, multiple relationships, whatever. I know a lot of people have had that issue. I haven't. I've never been a guy that was juggling 3 women and lying all the time. I mean, I cheated in relationships when I was using, but not to like what I would call that, like the addict, like seeking sexual behavior and all that stuff. Um, but I will do other things to get that same sense of self-worth, that sense of self-esteem. Me, I'm a perfectionist. Like, everything that I do needs to be better than what you would do. Any project that I embark on needs to be the best, and I'll hold myself to that sort of perfectionist standard. So there's a similar defect that manifests in different ways. I still have that defect. It's still kind of there. It still comes up and wants to push me to be this perfectionist. But I don't need to now go, well, maybe I'll go out and sleep with a bunch of women now because that'll make me feel better about myself. Like, I can trust that I have known enough people in this process that have been through that situation. I fucking know what the outcome of that's going to be. I don't need to take that journey myself at this point in my life. It requires a little bit of faith and humility to know, like, I am not terminally unique. Like, I'm not so much better than everyone else that my experience with that is going to be different than the dozens of other men that I have heard go down that path.
As a guy who frequently beats his head against the wall, making the same mistake over and over, I'm a little offended by smart people learning from their own mistakes. don't, don't like this idea. So interestingly enough, I'm sitting here looking at one of the quotes I pulled out of the literature, and it says, "We learn that we are growing when we make new mistakes instead of repeating old ones." And I think that's interesting because I definitely, before recovery, wanted to not make any mistakes. That was my ultimate goal of perfectionism. And so to understand that, like, mistakes are fine, just continual mistakes that aren't working are kind of ridiculous to some extent. And mean we're stagnant in our lives, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, for me specifically, obviously parenthood and being in a long-term relationship have been the biggest challenges to my spiritual condition. And I mean, just in the way that I act and the way that how far separated I seem to be a lot of times from the way that I want to act and the person that I want to be, and then the person that comes out, when my kid spills fucking milk all over the kitchen floor or whatever. Like, um, but I do try to give myself a little bit of break in that area because that's all been new territory since I've been in recovery. I didn't have kids when I was using. I was never in long-term relationships when I was using. I'm into this new uncharted territory, and yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I would say nowadays that's where most of my painful learning lessons come in. Is that I get in a situation I've never been in before, and I react in a way that at the end of the day, when I lay my head down at night, I go, shit, that didn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like that isn't in alignment with the person that I want to be. When I picture myself being, a great dad or a great spouse or a great employee, like that isn't how I acted today.
So I had a period of time where I sought out some other fellowships, and I didn't like stop seeking out other fellowships or programs, but I just had a period of time where it was necessary for me to seek out some other programs to assist me. And it was really interesting and relevant, and I learned a lot. And one of the things that blew my mind was I attended some Al-Anon, and it was mostly Al-Anon meetings that were focused on the adult child concept, which there's a whole nother fellowship or program for that too. But at this point, it was convenient to hit this Al-Anon meeting that focused on that topic. And what I found incredible, because I would never think before I went there, I would have thought I will get nothing out of Al-Anon. I don't even have a qualifier. Like nobody in my life drinks as like an alcoholic. And what I found was what they deal with there is how to deal with other people, right? How to deal with other people, how to not try to force your will on other people, how to allow other people to be who they are and still love them. And I'm like, I could probably leave NA because this is all the fuck I deal with in my life now. Like all I deal with is other people. Like,
Right.
I don't know. It's just extremely relevant. And I was like, holy shit, this is incredible stuff here. Like, this is definitely what I deal with. My wife, my kids, trying not to force myself on them, trying not to, trying to allow them to be their own people and just love them because of it, not in spite of it. And it's tricky.
Yeah.
So to deviate a little from some of the literature and the quotes that I have to get into, I did want to say when I first got to recovery, getting to the steps, getting to the sponsor, get to the service, we would hit these step meetings. Everybody seemed to share. It seemed like, and this could be just how it seemed like there was a lot more talk in people's shares about the steps back then. And frequently you would hear, oh my God, 4, it's terrifying and hard work and laborious and arduous. And then every once in a while you would hear, I guess, and this was somebody who actually made it past 4, that would share about, look, 4 sounds daunting, but wait till you get to 6. 6 is the real doozy, right? And so I had these expectations when I got to these steps. I was like, yeah, 4 is going to be tough. And it was, in the sense that it's a lot of work, but it wasn't really that awful for me. There was some scary parts about sharing some stuff nobody else knew that I thought made me look bad. But all in all, it wasn't too terrible. But then I got to 6 and I said, okay, all these people shared that 6 was going to be terrible. I have this information now, right? So I can just not let it be terrible. Obviously, like they've given me the information. I just won't let it get to me. And that shit did not work. Like 6 was it was crazy. It was overwhelming. I wrote down all these things and I looked at these character defects and it hurt. It hurt to be so keenly aware of how I fell short so frequently all day, every day. It truly hurt me as a human to know that I was so much further from being a good dude than I thought I was. And so I don't know if that's avoidable. I don't like that was a very painful part of step 6 for me, to put this on paper and then have myself constantly throughout the day see all these moments where I just was not the guy I really want to be and how my actions really affected others negatively a lot of times. And it was like, damn, man, this hurts. This hurts. It felt like I was in a funk. And then, the literature kind of talks about, we sort of try to fix this on our own. Like, oh, well, I'll just stop these character defects. I'll just stamp them down and never act on them. And that shit don't work at all. Like, awareness was not enough of it, right? I needed more than just awareness. And so I don't know if you had any experience similar to that, but that was my early on experience with step 6.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was terrifying. I mean, it was really difficult. It's like, for me, it felt like a lot of those defects were almost like instincts. Like, they just seemed to be like, this situation comes up and this is fucking what I do. Like, I don't even like the process of like the thought before the action isn't even there. Like, somebody cuts me off on the highway, I'm fucking road raging and blowing the horn and flicking them off and tailgate, just that stuff seemed just so a part of who I was that it almost felt insurmountable. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna fix that. And maybe that's the part of why we turn to that, like a power greater than ourselves, because obviously I was aware that these weren't behaviors that I liked about myself. I was aware that they weren't things that I had wrote enough to know that I didn't like these things. But sort of figuring out and knowing what to do about them was the problem. Because let's take a road rage incident. Well, if someone cuts me off on the road, I mean, I don't have the ability to just go, well, I'm angry and I should not be angry. Like, I'm angry and that's just what happened. And I don't have control over that part. But what I do have control over it is what I do with that anger. That's where I have to sort of take some responsibility and be like, same as, back what I learned early on in recovery. Like, I'm not responsible for my thoughts, but I'm responsible for my behaviors. And, for me, 6 was a big process of getting to understand that.
Yeah, everything you just spoke about, I'm listening to the audiobook right now called The Anger Trap. And it's, I mean, I don't believe I could have listened to this 15 years ago and, had the same reaction to it. I might have just completely ignored it. Like, things happen in line for a reason. But listening to this now, I'm just sad that I did not become more aware of my underlying anger and how that affects the way I treat and interact with others earlier, because it's hard to see even now. Like, it's hard to see that I still have a lot of anger inside. And like you said, the cool thing is, like, now in those moments, it's nice when I'm conscious and present to have the choice to do something different. I thought the same thing. I thought, I'm angry, and the only thing I can do now is this thing I do when I'm angry, which is explosively tell you how wrong you are, belittle you, and make you see how right you are, how right I am, and that you need to do what I want you to do. And like, that's not the only option. And it's been interesting this week to see I'll go a little too far, and I can just see it in the person's face that I'm interacting with, right? I can just like, their face just melts into this, I'm a smaller person now. And I'm like, oh shit, there I am, right? In my head, I can just see, and I got to walk that, whatever it was, I just stepped over the line. I got to walk it back and get on the right side of the line and try to, fix that for the moment. But yeah, I agree. My defects felt so ingrained that they were impulsive, and they felt like they were the only possible thing that could happen when I had that particular feeling. They did not feel like there was the ability to do anything different with them. Right. And that's what I think you just spoke about. Like, the anger, there's nothing wrong with the anger. Like, the anger is useful. It informs us of when someone's treating us but poorly, and it informs us of different situations that we need to address. But how we deal with it, there are more ways than just that, one way we're used to.
Right. And, this process of the 6 step, I would say in later recovery. So it's hard to kind of not jump ahead into other steps, because, the way I would say I live my life now is I live like 6, and then, well, through a process of living like a 10th step, and sort of taking a regular inventory, or looking back on my day or over my week and seeing, what areas I might have done this or that. It's a sort of mini version of 5, 6, 7. You know what I mean? Like, I go through my day, I say, oh yeah, I had this incident at work, and I, maybe lost my temper, got mad at these people, and I acted in this way. I don't feel too good about that. So let's take a look at that. All right, so what could I have done different? How maybe can I address that in the future? And then what are some red flags that I can tell when I'm getting into that situation? What are some things that I can see? Because, like I say, usually with me getting angry, most times I can sort of feel it ramping up. I can feel it. I mean, occasionally I go like from 1 to 10. I mean, obviously that happens sometimes, but through a process of an inventory, which the first go through the steps would have been that big fifth step. Now it's little mini fifth steps in my day or week. It's like I am identifying what areas get me into dangerous situations. I am sort of learning to look at what situations really push my buttons. Well, the kids and making a mess at the house, that one sets me off in a minute. Coming in from work and seeing the kids shit all over the house when I know they've been home all day, and there's food plates out on the table and a soda can laying on the floor. Like, that stuff sets me off. So now that I know that, what do I want to do with it? Am I willing to do something different, or do I just want to come in, start screaming, yelling, fucking kick the soda can across the room, or do I want to try something different,
And you point that situation out. I don't think that's too unique. I think a lot of people deal with, children and frustration and messes and all those things, right? And so I'm picturing myself, the reason I wanted to come in and throw a fit and kick the soda can across the room was because I didn't believe people were hearing me if I didn't do that. Right. I felt very unheard in my life. And so it's like, if I don't make this dramatic, angry scene that might scare these little people, nobody's going to hear me. And the truth was, honestly, and even in making that scene repeatedly, they didn't hear me.
Right? They didn't hear you then either.
Right. The same shit still happened. And it's not that they didn't hear me. They just have their own priorities in their life. Right. And so, yeah, can I scare them enough to do it less often? Sure. I'm bigger than them. I can scare them somewhat. That's not really how I want to parent, though. But yeah, that it was all about, I'm scared if I don't do this reaction, I won't get the outcome I'm looking for. And then, like, over time, I realized I'm still not getting the outcome I'm looking for. I'm just feeling like shit for being kind of a bully to my children.
Right.
And so then it's okay. Hey, let's try some other things. The trick about trying other things is that I got to be willing to accept that nothing might change and be okay with that. Right.
Yep.
Highly possible. Other people are not going to always change no matter what we do. And that's just part of the acceptance and growth of us, right? What is that challenging me to understand about me? Just to click on to some of these quotes that I had pulled out that seemed pretty nice. I think we kind of touched on this. Our character defects are basic human traits that have been distorted out of proportion by our self-centeredness, causing enormous pain to us and those around us. And I think that's an important one to remember, that that these are basic human traits, right? These aren't something that are wildly make us terrible people. They're just things that, because we're totally self-centered in ways that we don't understand all the time, we blow them out of proportion, but they also cause enormous pain to us and those around us. I forget that frequently, that like these are painful for everybody involved.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, and just like the kids thing, like I will feel like they're not listening or they're disrespecting me, and then my way of lashing back out at that is to like degrade and humiliate and belittle them. And I think that because that builds me up, it makes me feel better, like, oh, you're gonna hurt me, well, I'm gonna hurt you back. And again, in that moment, I'm not identifying or recognizing that pattern of thinking. I'm mad, I'm hurt, so I want to hurt back, and learning that I can do that. I have that right, if you want to call it that. They're my kids, and if that's the way I want to parent, I can parent that way. But I don't, it doesn't make me feel good about who I am. That's not the person that I want to be, and unfortunately doing that enough times, I find the willingness to maybe handle that situation a little differently.
Yeah, and I didn't pull this quote out, but there was a couple of different pieces of the readings that spoke to what you talked about. You've talked about it in previous episodes too, and you just kind of spoke about it here, that sometimes we feel bad about the way we act because that's the energy we need to inspire to change and do something different. And it talked about like that's what happens oftentimes. We feel bad about. Same thing that happened with treating my kids. Like I started to leave those situations feeling like, man, I don't want to feel like this. Like I feel like a piece of shit for talking to them the way I just did, right? Like I want to do something different. God, I just want to be relieved of this feeling.
Yeah, and some of those defects, I mean, some of them are things that we've developed, and then some are things like I will repeatedly find myself parenting like I was parented, even though I know it was wrong, or I, not that it was wrong per se. My parents were good people, they tried their best, but they made some mistakes. I mean, obviously everyone does, but I was not neglected, abused, whatever. um but my mom was pretty harsh. She had a pretty critical and judgmental way about her, and she would kind of insult us and belittle us in ways that probably weren't too emotionally supportive, that's for sure. Um, and so I find myself falling into those behaviors, like, well, this is the way I was raised, so this is the way you must do it. This is how this is done. Because I didn't have any other examples. I didn't, most of us don't read a bunch of parenting books and shit before we have kids. We have kids. And then after we make a bunch of mistakes, we might go read some parenting books. But it's usually reactive, not proactive for most people. Um, and so, I still will occasionally find myself stuck into these patterns of, well, this is how I was raised. This is all I know about being a parent or a spouse. And again, through this process of recovery and finding this, like a willingness to do something different, I can look to sources outside myself. I can maybe, read a book here or there or seek some information online, to find some answers to some of these things that I do.
I feel like I've shared this on a podcast, and I guess if it's not here, maybe it's on the other little solo podcast I goof off with on the side. But I feel like for me as a parent, if I parent and I'm not entirely present or conscious, I'm parenting by default from whatever was given to me, just like what you just talked about. Like if I don't actively think about what is the purpose of this rule that I'm doing and does it make sense in the life of me and my kids, I just do naturally whatever was given to me by default, which as I've grown in my life and examined some of those things my parents gave to me, like, oh, this is just what we do, right? We don't eat this at this time of day or something. Like most of the shit does not make any sense or have any bearing in science or any reality. And I look at it and I'm like, well, why the fuck did we do that? That's dumb.
Right. Right. But see, we become so married to ideas like that. We become so, like say, they become so ingrained without really much thought or research. And I would say through an experience of a 6-step where we begin to look at some of our ideas, look at the ways that we think about things, examine our, motivations behind our actions, we become open-minded to new solutions and maybe better information.
Yeah, I love the ability to re-examine things I do in my life, right? I don't necessarily have to give my kids chicken noodle soup when they're sick because there is no real healing property in it, right?
Right.
Is it a bad idea? No, it might not be. It might be a great idea. Like, but I don't have to follow these traditions and remedies for things that really don't serve any purpose in my life. And I don't even understand. I've actually gone to my mom and asked her at times, I'm like, why was this the rule? And usually their answer is just, oh, well, that's what we did. And it's like,
Right.
that, there's no reason for that. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Super, super interesting stuff. But yeah, definitely reason to stay present and aware of why we do what we do. Because if not, we just act in ways that aren't usually beneficial. Another quote, I think you kind of already mentioned this: when the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than our fear of change, we will surely let go, right? Just the idea that eventually, man, the pain will get great enough that we will, because we're scared to do something different. And the next quote touches that. We may wonder what will happen to us without the use of what we may see as survival skills. Like what will happen in my life when I let go of trying to manipulate to get what I want? Right? That's scary when we're used to getting what we want, right? I don't like the pain of not getting what I want. And so, yeah, it has to be some pain in the way I'm acting sometimes, right? I think maybe as we move, pain becomes not the only motivator. As we grow in recovery, there's other motivators. Like I'm not necessarily working my steps right this moment due to pain in my life. Like, yeah, there's always some pain, but I'm working steps because it's the right thing to do, and I want to continue my growth in life. But early on, for sure, pain is the absolute only motivator that worked for me. Maybe other people got better ones.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So here's one. I'm going to skip that one for now. Actually, we'll come back to that. I do like this one. Even after years of recovery, we may feel devastated at the reappearance of some old defect we thought had been removed. We are humbled by our imperfection, but let there be no mistake. Humility is the ideal state for an addict to be in.
Yeah,
I thought that
really
was incredible. Yeah. And it's really relevant for my life. I have found at different points in my recovery where I don't want to say I've woken up because it's not like it happened overnight, but my revelation seemed to happen all at once. And I've kind of been awakened to this idea that, oh shit, I have this amount of time. I've done this much work. And in this exact moment I'm sitting in, I feel like I haven't changed a bit. I feel like I'm full of sickness and disease, and it's terrible. I don't know. Have you ever come to any moments like that where you just felt terrible about your progress and like you're not far enough?
Sort of. So early on, I think it was my wife had said to me, like, we're all going to have bad moments, bad days, and things like that. And so I try not to sort of put a total judgment on my life based on a day. Yesterday was a day, for example. Yesterday, I just, no particular no major problems, but it just felt like the whole day, everything I was trying to do was a struggle. It was all these minor inconveniences, and like I had to, go do the grocery shopping, and then I had to go to the hardware store, and neither of those places have the shit I need. So then I got to go to a different store to get this other stuff, and then I come home and I'm working on a couple things around the house, and this thing's not working out like I thought it should, and that thing, I fucked it all up, so I had to start over. Just some things like that, just general, life problems. But it just seemed to be one of those days where they just compounded on each other. So by the end of the day, I'm like, fuck this day, my life sucks, fucking everybody sucks, God hates me. It's just the same old, like, that's a thing that I do. I don't want to say frequently, but I find myself in that place. I've been there before. And so I just identify it like, yep, this is what this is. It's just a day where I'm full of self-pity and self whatever, and that's okay. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Day's going to start over, and I probably won't feel this way tomorrow. And so, when I've had days where I feel like I haven't had much growth, or I feel really bad because I've had those days too, I usually, most of the time, the next day it goes away or it passes. I don't usually stay stuck in those patterns for long periods of time. If I did, I would probably seek professional help, because I would think that maybe I've struggled with maybe depression or some sort of mental issue. But because that's what I understand to be like depression, is when you get stuck in those patterns of thinking for a long period of time.
So this was more,
yeah.
oh, sorry. This was more, not so much like having one of those days or something like that, but this was more, I think, what had happened, and it did somewhat involve mental health, was that unchecked mental health went on in recovery, right, for me. And I maybe wasn't aware that I needed outside help, and I continued to act on some character defects that weren't drug use, but I just continued to do them because they seemed to be the answer for my mental health depression problem, and I guess what ultimately happened was I acted on them long enough and wasn't spiritually disciplined and working on my spiritual growth. And so the focus was more on these outside things that kept bringing me little fixes to get me by. And then it all culminated to a moment where it was like, Jesus, here you are with this amount of clean time and this much step work, and you're acting like a piece of shit still. Like, you're fake. You're not real. You're not really recovering. And so it was more one of them moments. And I don't know your whole story, but I've never heard you describe participating in things like that. And so the solution was, at that point, I did seek some outside help, right? And I, visited some other programs for some of the other character defects I was acting on. I ended up on an antidepressant for a time, a long time, that I felt I needed, and completely assisted me to become a different person. And so maybe it was just a mental health issue, but it definitely felt like a lack of ability to address character defects, and they kind of spiraled out of control and took me to a place that felt very much like the bottom I experienced right before I walked in the door. And so I don't know if everybody goes through that, but that was the moment I came to after my years of recovery, feeling devastated that I was still this person.
Yeah, and I haven't had that experience. I've certainly had times or moments or situations where I thought, shit, I'm not near as good as I think, I don't know about you. I think very highly of myself. so I'm constantly, disappointed in myself for small things that I fall short on time and time again. I typically tend to hold myself to some superhuman standard that I can't possibly live up to. So I am repeatedly but it's not it's not typically in a major way where I beat myself up. Now I haven't, I guess I don't want to take credit because I'm sure half of it's just been luck, but no, I wouldn't say I've had anything as you're describing where I've found myself stuck in patterns of really bad behavior. I mean, I guess just to be frank, since I've never been, cheating on my wife or excessively spending money or caught up into gambling or any real major devastating character defects. It's just been the little day-to-day life stuff, issues with anger, issues with getting caught up in just self-centeredness, stuff like that. So I haven't had any major character defect episodes that I've engaged in for a while.
Gotcha. So to take this in another direction, one of the things I've realized with all these people, there's a lot of people speaking out on social media about different things. There's the argument about the political stuff. There's the argument about the quarantine versus let's be open. There's, now the newer argument about, it's almost seems to be a Black Lives Matter protesting versus people condemning rioting. I don't know. I don't want to get into any specifics of that whatsoever. But what I had realized in some of my frustration towards, people who believe things opposite than me, whatever that may be, we'll leave it up in the air. I was like, why can't these motherfuckers just act like they care or see that they don't care or whatever it was that I wanted them to do. I wanted them to somehow understand the beliefs that I had and be on the page with that, because they seemed like bad people when they weren't, right? But I realized also that in their posts, they were saying the same thing, just the opposite. Like, why can't y'all see what we see and act like we want you to act, right? And so I kind of, in coming, I'm like, oh, we're coming up to the 6th step. And I made a post, and I made the post about me, but I really meant it about everybody else. And it was, on Twitter, and it was like, what is it about me that can't accept the world the way it is and wants to enforce my will on it? And I made another post that said, we're awful quick to point out what other people should be doing for people that can't fix our own character defects, right? And so I was looking at that, and one of the quotes from the literature that I found was, rather than condemning the behavior of another, we look at ourselves. And look, this was my self-righteous way to condemn the other side of the street, right? This was my self-righteous way to say, oh, all you judgy fucks out there can't even look at yourself. You're not even working a program. Like, I wanted to go on Facebook and just comment on everybody's little judgy status. Like, what fucking step are you working? right? Like, because it's obvious you're not working on yourself. You're working on everybody else and judging them and calling them names and shit, right? Look, here's the truth. I'm doing the same shit in my head, right? I'm not doing it on Facebook, but I'm doing it in my head. And so the whole thing is interesting that we spend so much time talking about how all these other people need to change and adjust so that we can be comfortable in the world. And the truth of this step, I think, is that that's the exact opposite of what we need to do. We need to ignore what the fuck everybody else is doing, whether we like it or not, and just look at ourselves and figure out where we need to grow spiritually. Me calling people idiots and whatever other names that people are calling each other is not actually doing anything. Nobody's hearing that. Nobody's listening to that. Why am I not looking at myself and wondering why I need to call people names? Like, those people just have an opinion, right? I don't share it, but it's just an opinion that I don't know. Any take on that?
Yeah, so for me, like I'll give you my practical how I'm living with most of that now, because I tend to in my head feel the same way. I tend to think that what I think is right, obviously, and I tend to think that I am educated, I think deeply about things, and that I know more than most people on most subjects. I know how arrogant that sounds. I recognize that in myself, so I can own it, which helps a lot. You know what I mean? Like, it helps to know, like, yes, this is me. This is what I do. So we can act differently. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to act that way. I recognize that I do that. So in practicality, what happens most of the time, let's take, Facebook. Like, I'll be sitting at Facebook, someone will post some like ass backwards racist comment. It's not directly racist, but it's racist, and I want to point that out to them. So I fucking pull up the comments and I start to type in. And like, before I hit send, I sit there and I usually will think about it and think, do I really want to engage in this? Is this worth my time and effort? Is this something that I want to do? And every time so far, I say no, and I delete the comment and I close Facebook and I don't fucking engage. It's not because I think that that makes them any more right. And it's not because I don't believe in my argument, because I definitely think I could out argue them if I wanted to. I just don't think that's a good place to be. And maybe that's an application of this step. It's like, it's not my job to fix the world. I think that it is. I want to take that responsibility with everyone that I see, and the guy on the road that cuts me off, and the, person in the grocery store that's fucking walking the wrong way up and down the aisle, all that stuff. But is that worth it to my own spirit? And is it really going to do anything? And two, who the fuck says that I'm right? Why do I get to decide that my way is so much better? Like, I guess I just don't take myself that serious, even though I think I'm smarter and think that I know more and think that my way is better. I just don't take myself that serious anymore. And so in doing that, I can let go of people that are wrong, because I don't need to take them serious either.
Yeah, I do my best not to respond to anything along the lines. It doesn't mean I don't stop and read some comment sections or have my opinions or feelings, or close down Facebook angrily as if I'm hanging up a phone in the 80s. But yeah, I just try to avoid most of it myself, because I don't want to get caught up in it. I know how angry I can get. I know how mean I can be, and I know that I've spent a lifetime of how to feel better by putting others down, and so I don't want to plant those kind of seeds out in the world. But I am now, and instead of just avoiding, looking at it or getting off of Facebook, I'm also trying to see, what is it about me that wants to act the way I want to act? Right? What is it about me that wants to lash out at these people with differing opinions? And I'm trying to just dig a little deeper. And it's almost, if anything, it's more of just a reminder that, hey, instead of judging them, how am I living today? Because it's real easy when I start judging everybody else to completely lose focus on how I'm living and live all kind of cruddy in my own day-to-day life and just be worried about how those people over there aren't, acting right on Facebook. And that's not helping me. I need to, how am I living today? Was I nice to my daughter? She asked for a haircut last night and I don't know how I feel about it. And now I'm like, that should be the priority of my life. How am I treating her about this subject that I'm unsure of, right? Not how these people on Facebook need to change their way of acting.
Yeah, and I actually saw Saturday Night Live did a skit a while back about, similar. I think it was a racial thing, and it was in essence, like a bunch of white people making like Facebook comment posts about how much they're doing for this racial inequality by making a stupid Facebook post. Like, to me, like, that's taking yourself way too fucking seriously. Some of these issues are incredibly important. Like, racism in our country is, it's fucking terrible. Like, I don't want to see that in the world that I live in. I don't want to see it in my community. I don't want to see it, around me. I would like to think that if I was directly in a situation where there was some weird racism going on, I would try to stand up for the person, or I would try to be a voice that would speak out against it. Like, I think there are definite opportunities where we should act, and there are things we should do. Nothing against people want to go out and like protest out in the street and take action that way. Like, those are things you can do. But is fucking going down a 45-minute, Facebook argument with my cousin who lives in Florida fucking worth it? Like, is that where I want to spend that energy trying to make a difference? And do I think doing that is going to make any difference? And the truth for me is, no, it's really not. It's going to be one thing with one person that doesn't even seem like they're really willing to have. If you and I had a different opinion about it and we were somewhere having a coffee and we started to have a conversation, I would engage in the conversation. Hopefully not like self-righteously. And maybe that's an indicator that I'm in a bad place, is like, once I start, getting worked up and I feel myself getting to that self-righteous place, like, that's when it's not a good conversation anymore. And that's just me and my, again, understanding my character defects, understanding what happens. Because when I get to that place, I'm no longer listening to you and I am no longer open-minded. I am just thinking of counterpoints to whatever comes out of your mouth. That's all I'm thinking about at that point. Whatever you say, how can I spin it negative and figure out a way to make it wrong? And I'm no longer listening to what you're saying. I'm just trying to make you wrong. And that's, that's not a place I want to be. And that's probably where they are too. So it's fucking pointless to go down that, And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do something, that we shouldn't take action, but it's like learning some discernment on, okay, what are some, and again, this all ties back into 6-step. Like, what are some good places where I can put this frustration or this anger into action in a good way? And then what are just me and my character defects of self-righteousness, and this fixing the world? This arguing with every individual on Facebook who makes a comment is probably more that. It's probably more acting out on a character defect than it is really trying to achieve some good in the world.
Absolutely. I want to get to a couple more things to say. There's a couple paragraphs in It Works that I really liked. I'll read that right now. It says, although some of us have not understood the critical importance of the 6th and 7th steps, they are essential actions that must be taken if we expect to make any significant and lasting changes in our lives. We cannot simply say, yes, I'm ready. God, please remove my defects, and go on to step 8. If we gloss over the 6th and 7th steps and go on to make our amends, we will only wind up owing more amends by repeating the same destructive patterns as before. The lifelong process of the 6th step is just that, a process. We've started the process of becoming entirely ready, and we will strive to increase our readiness throughout our lifetime. Our job is to become entirely ready and to open our hearts and minds to the deep internal changes that can only be brought about by the presence of a loving God. I'm sure that last sentence wasn't your ideal final sentence for that, but I love the idea that it points out that it's a lifelong process, right? Like, these defects might be removed in bits and pieces. We might get rid of lying early but stealing later on, or vice versa. We might get rid of like degrees of lying or degrees of stealing as we go. But the chances are, and I don't even know if it's chances, we're going to be working on pieces of our character that are shitty for the rest of our life. Like, this isn't I wrote step 6, I did step 7, and now I can, go up in the pulpit and preach free of sin. Like, that's not how this works.
Right. And for me, the truth is, it's been most of those defects, I would say, are still, there. They're still, I still have that. I still struggle with the same defects. They just come up and manifest in different ways or in different areas. And as I embark on new situations and new, paths in my life, I'll see those same old defects come up in different ways, So, and then some of them are just way more deeply ingrained. I mean, some are just, way down in there, take a little more consistent effort, whereas others are a little easier.
Yeah, I got a large cup of water, and it's got a tiny hole in it somewhere, right? And I see the hole, and then, the first week I decide I'm going to shove cotton in it. And so I just keep shoving cotton in, and it keeps not working. Eventually the water seeps out again. And then I'm like, all right, well, I'll get rid of this character defect. The cotton ain't working. Let me, shove some toilet paper in it or something. Like, it's just the object of continually, I'm still trying to fix the same problem, which I think in 7 I've gotten to a different understanding, but I'll save that for July. But yeah, we just keep using these defects in different ways, trying to get the same remedy out of it, right? We're using them to try to fix the same problem underneath of it all. The last quote I had, and I hope this takes us, quickly, because we're getting a little short on time, but quickly into what I wanted to ask you about this. The quote is, part of the process of becoming entirely ready involves practicing constructive behavior. And so, as this step says, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And as you are not someone who believes in a traditional type being that is God, how do you become entirely ready to have God help you in the removal of your character defects?
This may sound a little overly simplistic, but I would say if I were to take out the word God and put spiritual principles in place of the word God, like I am trying to practice spiritual principles in place of my defects. I'm trying to find, a better way of dealing with whatever that underlying problem is. And again, to get back to something like the anger that I feel when the guy cuts me off on the highway, like I'm going to be angry. I don't just get to go, well, being angry, that just makes me an asshole. So I'm just not allowed to be angry when the guy cuts me off on the highway. And if not, I'm not spiritual. Like, no, that's not it at all. Like, when the guy cuts me off, I'm going to be angry, and that's okay. I just own that. Like, yeah, now I'm angry. Okay. What do I do when I'm angry? Do I want to flick them off and cut them off and, race down around them and start a road rage incident? Or do I just want to try to, all right, I'm fucking angry. Like, what are we going to do with this? All right, let's try some of these things we know. Let's take a deep breath. Let's fucking whatever. Count to 10, say a prayer. Let's just, sometimes it'll be just a justification. Like, hey, maybe he's late for work, or his fucking kid's in an accident. He's trying to get to the hospital. Whatever mechanism I want to use to try to practice like compassion, understanding, empathy, love, like whatever tool I want to use to try to put those in place of my self-righteousness, my self-centeredness, my whatever feeling, whatever rational I'm trying to make to, be angry at this person. I'm going to try to use a spiritual principle in place of that.
I waited all goddamn week for you to tell me just to replace the word God with spiritual principle. I was expecting gold here, Billy. No, that's actually pretty sensible. I mean, entirely ready to have spiritual principles replace all these defects of character. I think me and you and I don't know if we should start our own program, because I know we're conceited, but that's a little much. But but honestly, some of these steps need to be reworded. The searching and fearless moral inventory has definitely got to get the fuck out of town. And we were entirely ready to have God. Yeah, why not? We were entirely ready to have spiritual principles replace all these defects of character. Like there's no God in that. There's no you're forced to have a deity. You can be agnostic, atheist, you can be whatever the fuck you want, and that still applies.
Well, but there's a second piece to that, so I'll justify a little bit of maybe the power greater than ourselves or power outside of ourselves. It's like I don't just go, oh yeah, I'll just practice forgiveness here, and all of a sudden, poof, I know what forgiveness means. Like I need to seek an understanding of forgiveness outside of myself. Like I need to talk to people like you, or people in recovery, or maybe a spiritual counselor, or a person at a church that can help me get a understanding of forgiveness and what that looks like and how that looks in people's lives. These spiritual principles, what typically happens for me is I understand or know like the definition of them. I know what they mean, but knowing how to practice them in a situation is where my powerlessness comes in, is where my, weakness comes in. It's like I can know what a word means, but I don't know how to live it at all. So I need to look to other examples, to other people to help me understand how to apply these things in my life.
I think along with that, not only do we need the example and somebody to show us how to apply it, I think also I just can't do this alone, right? What I need when I'm going through it, I need to come to you and say, God, Billy, I'm not feeling heard by my family and I'm fucking angry and I want to choke them, right? And in telling you that, one, I get to feel heard because you're going to listen. And then two, I don't have to act on it. Like there's something about me getting it out and saying it that I no longer feel like I have to feel so compelled to do it. And so it takes like that power greater than, again, I can't carry a sofa up the steps by myself, but you and I together probably could. I can't act better all by myself, but once I can share with you this shitty thinking I have, it seems to make it easier for me to act better in my life. And so, yeah, I would say you're right. That is a higher power than just me alone.
Yeah. So, and I kind of, I don't want to say stole that a little bit, but of course, my wife and I talk a lot about recovery subjects. And for her, and I didn't work it this way, but for her, I believe it's a 6 step that she does the first time through with people. Because she got clean before the step working guide. So she doesn't give that to people that first go around. That's part of that 6-step process is writing out your character defects and then writing out the spiritual principle that's like the opposite of that character defect that you could work in place of that spiritual principle. I mean, that you could work in place of that defect. So that's an actual, thing that's written out when she does a 6-step with her sponsees. So
is that not in our step working guide? I thought it was. I thought that was part of
it. It might be. It's been a while since working guide. I can't remember 6-step.
I know people don't get that far. I was just that's cruddy, right? But look, I posted recently. I can't remember which of the steps it was. One of the last two, and I posted like, "Hey, what's your experience with this or whatever?" And it got like no response, and I was like, "Damn, really? Usually people respond a lot to our step questions." And I realized I was like, maybe we're getting to those steps that people haven't worked, so they don't have a picture out of. Right. That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a hugely beneficial conversation we've had today. I've enjoyed it. I've definitely got a lot out of it. 6 step is crucial to the process of change in my life. I can say that. It's not just making a list, even though that is a big part of it, but it's really, just seeing and being more aware of what is really going on in my actions on a daily basis and how they affect me and others, and if I'm okay with that or not.
Right. And that willingness is important, because if I just sit back and go, yep, I'm good with who I am today. I'm not shooting dope anymore. I got a job, maybe I'm not perfect, but I'm fucking good enough. So I'm happy with just not doing drugs. Where's the motivation to do any more work? For me, it's like a willingness of like, no, I believe that I can be a better person. I believe that I still have some areas in my life where I'm causing harm to myself and the people that I love. and even, people around me, and that I can do something about that. And that I, not that I can do something about it, but that I want to and am willing to do something about it.
Right. Well, do you have any more for today? This is probably about the right amount of time for a podcast, not too much over.
No, I think we covered the 6-step pretty well.
Excellent. Everybody get out there, continue working your steps so that you can get to step 6, so that you do have an opinion to contradict us about, so we can argue it with you, tell you how wrong you are. And no, but everybody have a great and safe week. If you're starting to get back to in-person meetings, be safe out there. Do safe behaviors. Just because they're open doesn't mean we should run back to do everything. Not to say that you shouldn't go, but just be careful in your attending in-person meetings. Also, make sure you're telling your local area that they're back open. We want the newcomer to know where to find us on our area websites. And we'll see you again next week.